She swept floors in silence, forgotten, invisible. But the night she whispered, "I can correct it," to a billionaire CEO struggling with a broken formula, everything changed. A fallen engineering prodigy turned janitor. A CEO trapped by a problem no one could solve. One moment of courage. One act of brilliance. And the beginning of a redemption the world never saw coming. The clicking of heels used to echo confidence beneath Tiana Moore's feet. That was a different lifetime. Back then, she walked into rooms expecting people to rise, because they always did. With a double degree in mechanical and electrical engineering, graduating top of her class, Tiana had the world waiting at her doorstep. Recruiters flooded her inbox. Tech firms wanted her. Government agencies had her on their radar. She was the woman every parent dreamed their daughter could become. But Tiana had other plans. She didn't want to build engines for machines. She wanted to design dreams for people. Fashion had been her secret muse all along, sketched between equations, hidden in the margins of textbooks. While her professors raved about her blueprints for hybrid motors, she was sketching dresses during lectures. When she graduated, she shocked everyone by walking away from a six-figure offer and instead registered a fashion startup. That was when Damien came into her life. He was charming, calculating, and perfectly timed. A former business major with an entrepreneur's smile and a dreamer's vocabulary, Damien made her believe in the impossible. He told her she wasn't crazy for wanting to combine her engineering mind with her fashion heart. He offered to co-found the company. "Let's create something no one's ever done before," he'd said. And she believed him. Together, they built Synth, Smart Threads Enhanced, a futuristic fashion brand merging wearable tech with high fashion. Smart jackets that changed temperature. Dresses that reacted to mood. Her designs were revolutionary. They landed magazine features and front-row invites. Investors lined up. Orders poured in. But success is a seductive liar. The first red flags were minor: missed meetings, vague answers, untraceable transactions. She brushed them off. They were growing fast. Chaos was normal. Then one morning, she walked into their shared office, and everything was gone. Damien's desk was empty. His phone disconnected. Their joint account bled dry. Warehouse cleared. Orders canceled. Lawsuits pending. And the final blow: her name removed from company ownership 2 weeks before the collapse. Fraud, betrayal, and embezzlement. Just like that, Tiana Moore became a ghost. With no family in the country and too proud to ask for help, she spiraled quickly. Her spotless credit drowned in legal fees. She sold everything she had: apartment, car, laptop. She went from a tailored suit to borrowed uniforms, walking past boutiques that once called her a genius. She'd knock on doors that used to welcome her. They didn't even recognize her anymore. The lowest point wasn't the night she slept in a public restroom. It wasn't even the day her name trended online as the woman who got played. It was the moment she applied to Zentech Corporation, not as an engineer, not even as a receptionist, but as a night janitor. She stood in line with people who avoided eye contact, each holding wrinkled resumes and smelling of fatigue. When the hiring manager saw hers, so clean, so overqualified, he almost laughed. "You sure this is what you want?" Tiana looked at him with hollowed eyes and replied, "No, but it's what I need." They gave her the job. Night shift. Minimum wage. Cleaning the halls of a company she once dreamed of leading. She said thank you. That was 2 years ago. Now by day, she vanished in the crowds. By night, she reappeared, mop in hand, earbuds in, humming quietly to herself. Her home was a tucked-away corner in the parking garage, shielded by cardboard and an old mattress someone had discarded. A few belongings fit into a backpack. She kept one old framed photo of her and her mother, back when she was a proud graduate, back when she believed life was fair. Every night she swept those polished floors, her mind wandered. Equations still whispered in her brain. Designs still flickered behind her eyes. She solved problems on whiteboards after hours, just to see if she could still do it. Sometimes she wondered if anyone would ever notice her again. Not the janitor. Not the woman who failed. But the woman who once had everything, and still had something left. But until then, she waited in silence. Her life paused somewhere between forgotten brilliance and invisible survival. And deep inside, where nobody could see, she repeated one quiet promise to herself. One day, this story will change. Tiana knew the rhythm of the city's silence. By the time the last employee swiped out and the office lights dimmed into blue-gray stillness, she was already changing into her uniform. Black cargo pants, oversized cleaning shirt with the faded Zentech logo, and her badge, worn, scratched, and barely hanging on. Most nights she started on the second floor, working her way up. The silence helped. She liked hearing the soft thrum of electricity through the walls, the buzz of the vending machines that no one used after 8 p.m., and the ticking of wall clocks that marked time she no longer cared about. Her body moved automatically. Sweep, mop, wipe. But her mind wandered. It was the only part of her that refused to accept the life she lived now. Tiana had long since memorized the blueprint of Zentech's headquarters. Not the janitor's version, but the architect's version. The way the ceiling weight distributed above the atrium. The energy flow calculations built into the solar panel windows. She could see the flaws, minor but present. Things she would have done differently. Improvements no one had asked for. But no one was asking her anything. Once, about a year ago, she'd left a small diagram on the side of the building's boiler control system. Just a rough schematic, an efficiency correction. It had taken 2 minutes. She didn't even sign it. 2 weeks later, she noticed the new part installed, exactly as she suggested. No credit. No mention. Still, she smiled to herself that night. It was enough to know someone saw it, even if they didn't know it was her. She didn't do it again. Not because she was angry, but because she realized something deeper. She was invisible now. Her past brilliance was irrelevant without the right title, the right clothes, the right address. Even in the building that once might have hired her as an engineer, she was now just the woman who takes out the trash. And yet, she kept coming back. Because the truth was, Zentech was her last thread to sanity. This place, with all its glowing monitors, sleek labs, and glass walls, reminded her of who she used to be. And though no one knew it, she lived here in more ways than one. Her nights ended in Garage B2, tucked between a utility wall and an old air compressor. She had fashioned a sort of den, 2 tall cardboard sheets for privacy, a flattened futon mattress someone had thrown out during an office renovation, and a plastic crate with a change of clothes, a journal, and 1 pair of headphones that still worked in one ear. At first, she'd cry at night, but over time, the tears turned into stillness. She became efficient at hiding her life. She'd shower early in the executive washroom before sunrise, brush her teeth quickly and carefully in a stall, dry her hair under the warm air of a hand dryer. No one questioned her movements. People rarely noticed her. And when they did, they never looked her in the eye long enough to recognize pain. Tiana didn't beg for help. She didn't expect kindness. She just wanted a chance. Not pity, a door. One opening, one moment where someone would stop and actually see her. But hope was fragile, and days turned into months, months into years. Still, her mind stayed sharp. At night, she sketched blueprints in her journal under the flickering garage light. Engines, wearable electronics, even a few designs for coats that heated automatically based on skin temperature. No one would ever see them, but that didn't matter. They kept her soul from going numb. There were times when she doubted everything, that she had ever been smart or capable or worthy of success. But then she'd look at her hands. These hands once built things. These fingers once typed code, signed deals, drew patterns that changed how people thought of clothing. She still had those hands. So every night, after she finished her shift and returned to her makeshift home in the garage, she'd sit up for a few minutes, open her journal, and whisper her designs to the paper, as if telling a friend. One night, after finishing her rounds, she noticed a team had left a circuit diagram half-scribbled on a whiteboard in a second-floor lab. She stared at it for a long while. They'd missed something. A loop that would cause intermittent shorting during high-energy output. She wanted so badly to fix it. Just wipe the board and write the right line. But she didn't. She walked away. Not because she didn't care, but because she feared hope. Hope had betrayed her before. Still, as she passed the whiteboard again the next night, she found herself slowing, her eyes drifting over the miscalculation again. It would be so easy to correct. But no more ghosts. She shook herself out of it and descended back into the garage. The concrete welcomed her like a familiar ache. She folded herself into her corner, wrapped her coat around her shoulders, and pulled her journal close. She didn't know it then, but her moment was coming. And when it did, it wouldn't arrive with applause. It would come in a whisper. That night, the building was quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears, where every footstep sounds like an interruption. Tiana was nearly done with the 15th floor, executive territory. She always saved it for last. Not because she feared it, but because it felt sacred. Cold, elegant, and untouched. As if the very air there was reserved for people who owned futures. The top floor housed the conference wing, boardrooms encased in glass, walls lined with interactive screens, and sweeping city views most employees never got to see. By 11:45 p.m., those rooms were always dark. But tonight, there was a light still glowing behind the frosted glass of the Infinity Room, Zenteka's crown jewel meeting space. Tiana paused at the corner. From where she stood, she could see the silhouette of a man pacing in front of a wall-sized screen. Tall, broad-shouldered, sharp movements. He wasn't on the phone. He wasn't speaking. Just moving, restless, agitated. Her first instinct was to turn away. Janitors weren't meant to see, only clean. But something made her stay. She turned off her cart's squeaky wheel lock, set her mop aside quietly, and stepped forward, each footstep softer than the last. The glass was only partially frosted near the bottom, so she had to straighten her back to see clearly. And then she realized who he was. Victor Hart, CEO, Billionaire. The man whose name hung beside the Zentec logo in every newspaper article, every press release, every TED Talk. His face was never far from a screen. Cool, composed visionary. The man who built an empire from a single patent in renewable energy. But tonight, he didn't look like a man with answers. He looked like a man lost. His sleeves were rolled halfway, the tie hanging loose from his collar. And in front of him, on the digital board, was chaos, lines and lines of formulas, diagrams, and error messages blinking red. She watched as he rubbed his forehead, stepped back, then leaned in again. He made a mark, paused, shook his head, and erased it violently. Over and over. Tiana's eyes followed the equations. They weren't foreign. In fact, they were familiar. The math was high level, something about energy distribution in microcapacitor arrays. Complex, but not unbreakable. She tilted her head. Her brain, long starved for a challenge, started spinning. He inverted the polarity loop. That's why the circuit keeps failing. Her fingers twitched at her side. Instinct. She didn't realize she was moving until her boots echoed across the tiles. She was almost at the glass door. Victor didn't hear her. She watched for another moment. He stepped back, looked at the mess on the board again, and muttered something under his breath. It sounded like, "This doesn't make sense." Tiana felt the words slip from her mouth before she could stop them. "I can correct it." The sound sliced through the silence like a blade. Victor froze. His head snapped around, eyes wide, guarded, alert. His hand immediately hovered near the edge of the board, like he was shielding it from her gaze. When he saw who had spoken, his face contorted with confusion. "What did you say?" His voice wasn't angry, just disbelieving. Tiana stepped forward slowly, heart pounding. "I can correct it," she repeated, quieter this time, almost reverently. "Your loop is inverted. It's causing a current leak in the delay matrix." He stared at her. His expression was unreadable. She stepped closer to the board now, drawn like a moth to flame. "You're using dual polarity triggers across a single-channel bypass. It's canceling itself out at 13% capacity. That's why your outputs keep crashing." Victor blinked. Once. Twice. Tiana raised a hand. May I? He didn't answer, so she moved forward. With careful fingers, she took the marker from the tray, not meeting his eyes. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. From awakening. From familiarity. From standing in front of the very thing she was born to do. She wiped away 2 segments of the formula, redrew the circuit path, corrected the timing curve, and reinforced the capacitor node. Then she stepped back. The board recalculated instantly. All red turned green. Solved. Victor stared at the screen like it had just spoken back to him. His mouth slowly parted. He looked at the board. Then at her. Then back again. How did you? He started. Then, wait. Who are you? Tiana swallowed hard. She looked down at her janitor uniform, then up again. There was nowhere left to hide. My name is Tiana Moore, she said, her voice barely holding steady. I was once an engineer. I used to design circuits like this before my life fell apart. Victor said nothing. He studied her face like a puzzle piece he hadn't expected to find. The kind that doesn't belong to the box, but somehow fits perfectly. I didn't mean to intrude, she added quickly, placing the marker back. I couldn't walk away from a broken formula. The room was silent again. Only this time, she was no longer invisible. Victor Hart stood motionless in the middle of the boardroom. His eyes flicked from the corrected formula to the woman in front of him. The janitor who, just minutes ago, had been nothing more than a passing figure in the periphery of his world. Now she stood there quietly, shoulders squared, face open and vulnerable, her presence commanding more attention than anyone he'd met in years. Silence ballooned between them. Not awkward. Not tense. Heavy. Like something important had just happened. Tiana felt her palms start to sweat. She could hear her own heartbeat thudding in her ears, a fast, nervous rhythm. She had done it without thinking, without permission. The realization of what she'd just done was beginning to settle in now. The correction. The board. The breach of hierarchy. The fact that she had just walked up to the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company and rewired one of his most confidential problems in front of his face. But she hadn't been able to stop herself. She looked at the screen again. All green. All clean. Victor finally blinked. You said you were an engineer, he murmured as if testing the words. I was, Tiana replied. She forced her voice to stay steady. Graduated top of my class in engineering. Specialized in adaptive electrical systems. I used to build things like this. Victor stepped forward slowly. He wasn't alarmed anymore. Now he looked intrigued. Cautious, yes, but with an edge of wonder. Like he'd just uncovered something buried beneath the floorboards of his own building. He studied her for a moment. His brow furrowed. What are you doing here? She followed his gaze downward, toward her uniform, her work boots, the ID badge clipped to her belt with the words Maintenance Division, Night Shift. I clean floors, she said softly. That's not what I meant. She met his eyes then, and for the first time, she let herself tell the truth. I was engaged once, she began, voice low but clear. To a man I trusted. We started a company together. Fashion tech, wearable innovation. My designs, my code. His charm, his networking. We made a name for ourselves fast. Investors came in, orders exploded. And then he disappeared. Took everything. Emptied the accounts. Changed the ownership. Left me drowning in debts I couldn't pay. Victor's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. He didn't interrupt. Didn't look away. Tiana went on. I lost everything. The apartment. The company. My reputation. Nobody wanted to hire someone with bankruptcy filings and a scandal attached to her name. So I applied here. The janitorial job was the only thing they'd give me. I took it. Because I needed to eat. Because I needed a place to exist. The words hung in the air, painful and real. For a second, Tiana regretted saying them. She felt exposed, raw, a mess in front of the cleanest man in the building. But Victor didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with something else. Respect. And this? He asked, pointing at the corrected schematic on the screen. You've just been watching from the shadows? Solving problems for fun. Tiana allowed herself the faintest smile. I still think in circuits, even when I'm mopping floors. Victor stared at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the table, picked up his tablet, and started pulling up documents, designs, notes, calculations. He turned the screen toward her. Can you walk me through what you did? I want to understand how you saw it. It wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. Tiana exhaled slowly and stepped forward. She began pointing to the error in the original loop, explaining how his team's approach created a feedback delay during energy discharge. She spoke with clarity, precision, but not arrogance. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was speaking in her natural language. This was her fluency. Victor nodded slowly as she spoke, his mind clearly absorbing every word. My R&D team has been stuck on this for 6 months, he muttered. We've cycled through 4 consultants. You just walked in here and solved it in 5 minutes. I didn't walk in, she said, with a tiny laugh that died before it could grow. I clean this floor every night. I just never thought I'd speak. He put the tablet down. Why now? Tiana hesitated. Then, with honesty, because something about watching you struggle with it. I knew I could help, and I couldn't walk away this time. He nodded again, slower this time. Thoughtful. Well, he said, stepping back. Thank God you didn't. There was another pause. And then, quietly, as if tasting the idea, we need to talk more. Tiana tilted her head, uncertain. About the circuit? He shook his head. About everything. He walked toward the wall, pressed a small button near the screen, and turned off the board. The room darkened slightly, the green glow fading. I want you to come in tomorrow, he said, turning to face her again. Same time. But not to clean. I want to hear your ideas. All of them. Not just this circuit. I want to know what you've been thinking about. Designing. Building. Hiding. Tiana didn't respond right away. She couldn't. For a moment, it felt like her feet weren't touching the ground. Then she nodded, small, hesitant, but real. Victor gave her a slight smile. I'll see you tomorrow night, Miss Moore. He stepped out of the room, leaving her standing alone in the silence again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This time, it felt like a door had opened, and she was standing on the threshold. The next night, Tiana didn't sweep the second floor. Her hands weren't gripping a mop or pushing a wheeled cart full of disinfectant. Instead, they were clean, trembling slightly, clutching a spiral notebook filled with sketches and calculations she'd kept hidden for years. For once, she didn't wear her janitor's uniform. She wore a faded button-up shirt tucked neatly into black slacks, clean but modest, ironed in the restroom earlier that afternoon with a towel and the heat from a bathroom hand dryer. She felt out of place, like an imposter, like she was trespassing in a building she'd walked through 1,000 times. But this time, every light she passed on the way to the infinity room felt different. Brighter, like the building itself knew something had shifted. Victor Hart was already inside when she arrived. He wasn't in a suit this time. He wore a black turtleneck and slacks, standing near the end of the long glass table with a tablet in one hand and a coffee in the other. He looked up when the doors slid open. You came, he said simply. Tiana gave a small nod. You asked. He gestured to the seat at the table closest to the screen. Sit. She did slowly, clutching her notebook to her chest like armor. She wasn't sure what she had expected. Maybe another test, or maybe that he'd changed his mind. But as soon as she sat, he pushed the tablet toward her. Look at this, he said. This is the current schematic we're working on. It's an early-stage design for a dynamic power inverter. But it's unstable. If you spot anything wrong, don't hesitate. She hesitated. He noticed. Tiana, he said, voice softer. I don't need you to act like an employee tonight. I need you to think like an engineer. The words felt strange. Not because they were foreign, but because they were familiar. Like she was being called back to something sacred. She opened her notebook, flipped to a diagram she'd drawn weeks ago, before any of this began, and held it up. I've already built a variation of this. Or, well, I designed it in theory. It uses layered modulation to stabilize the fluctuations caused by variable loads. Victor leaned in, eyes sharp. He studied her sketch. You did this on your own? She nodded. In the garage. At night. Sometimes after my shift. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at her, not with disbelief anymore, but something else. A kind of curiosity that bordered on reverence. You realize what this is, right? He finally said, tapping the sketch. This isn't just clever. This is visionary. You solved a problem we've been trying to get ahead of for nearly a year. Tiana looked away, heat rising in her cheeks. It's just an idea. No, he said firmly. It's an edge. They spent the next 2 hours hunched over designs. Victor didn't speak down to her. He didn't patronize her. He listened, asked questions, debated. He treated her like an equal, like a colleague. Tiana's mind, long locked away behind grief and humiliation, began to breathe again. Ideas flowed from her lips like water released from a dam. For the first time in years, she belonged to the conversation. And Victor? He leaned in closer every time she spoke. At one point, he set his pen down and studied her again. Why didn't you try to come back to engineering after it all fell apart? She gave a sad smile. I did. For a while. But I didn't have connections anymore. My name was tied to failure. Every door that opened for me once closed. And I stopped knocking. Victor looked at her for a long time, then said something she wasn't expecting. I almost lost this company once. Tiana blinked. What? He nodded. It was early on, right after the first product launch. I overpromised to investors, burned through the seed capital too fast, tried to scale before we were ready. We were 2 days away from collapse before a senior engineer pulled me into a lab at midnight and showed me a correction that changed everything. He saved the company. Quietly. Behind the scenes. Tiana listened, stunned. Victor's voice had softened, grounded in something raw. I learned then that titles don't solve problems, he continued. People do. The ones who see what others miss. The ones who know how to fix what no one else can. Their eyes locked. I saw that in you last night. Tiana looked down, unable to hide the storm of emotion tightening her throat. She had spent so long convincing herself she had failed beyond redemption. But here, now, she was being seen for what she still was. Not a janitor. Not a victim. But a builder. A mind. Victor stood. I want you to work with me directly. Off the books for now. Quiet. Discreet. We'll set up a workstation here at night. You'll help me finalize the prototype. If this works, Tiana, this engine will change our industry. And you'll be at the center of it. She stared at him, blinking hard. Why me? She whispered. Victor's expression didn't flinch. Because you didn't just fix a formula. You knew what it needed. That kind of clarity? You can't teach that. And I'm not letting it go unnoticed again. Tiana looked down at her hands. These hands, once dismissed, forgotten, buried in dust and shame, had been handed a second chance. A door had opened, and this time she was walking through it. For the first time in 2 years, Tiana didn't sleep in the garage. That night, after hours of work and quiet conversation, Victor had handed her a small key card with a Zentech insignia printed in silver. He said nothing when he gave it to her, just pressed it gently into her palm and held her gaze. She looked down, confused, and turned it over. Executive Residency, Unit 3C. Her head snapped up. Victor had already turned away. There's a furnished suite on the upper floor, he said casually, like he was offering her a cup of coffee. It's not much, but it has a proper bed. And a shower that doesn't buzz like a vending machine. Tiana opened her mouth, but no words came. I'm not doing you a favor, Victor added, turning back. I'm removing an obstacle. You can't build engines on an empty stomach or 3 hours of sleep under a stairwell. So she went. That night, she took the elevator, not the service one, not the one that rattled and smelled like bleach and rust, but the main one. The one lined with gold-veined marble and soft LED lights. When it opened on the 21st floor, she stepped into silence. Thick carpets. A long, dim hallway. At the end, Unit 3C. The door beeped once, then opened. Inside, there was no grand reveal. No luxury worthy of a movie screen. But to Tiana, it was everything. There was a bed, neatly made with crisp white sheets. A small kitchenette. A desk. A window that looked out over the city lights. And above all, there was privacy. A space that was hers, if only temporarily. She stepped inside, closed the door gently, and leaned against it. For a long time, she didn't move. Then she walked slowly to the bathroom, turned on the hot water, watched the steam rise. She peeled off the uniform she had worn for far too long, stepped under the stream, and let the heat wash away years of humiliation. The water carried with it months of oil, of sweat, of shame. She didn't cry. Not that night. She was too tired, too stunned. She slept without fear. For the first time in years, she dreamed. Days turned into nights, and nights into a rhythm. Every evening after the building emptied, Tiana would take the private elevator up to the infinity room, now her personal lab. Victor had cleared it for her use, setting up a fully equipped engineering bench with custom tools, access to Zenteka's internal systems, and clearance to the project files she'd once only glimpsed in passing. By day, the boardroom held meetings. By night, it became hers. She moved like she was born to be there. She modified the engine design, corrected voltage anomalies, reduced power consumption by 17%. On her own, she designed a modular sensor system to track energy drift in real time, a feature Victor's entire team had failed to conceptualize. Victor would arrive late, sometimes in a hoodie and jeans, sometimes carrying 2 coffees. They worked side by side. He stopped treating her like a miracle and started treating her like a partner. And Tiana, for the first time in so long, began to feel whole again. But not everything was seamless. She avoided her former co-workers, the janitorial staff. She knew they whispered, "Why is she walking with the CEO? Why is she on the upper floors?" She didn't correct them. She couldn't. Zentek wasn't ready yet to announce who she was. Victor was cautious. He told her it was for her protection, for her focus. The world, he warned, would want her to fail again the moment they saw her rise. They'd call her a fluke, a charity case, a viral story. He didn't want that. Neither did she. So they worked in secret, quietly, carefully, until the engine was perfect. One night, as they ran final diagnostics on a prototype no larger than a shoebox, Victor turned to her. "You do know," he said, "this engine doesn't just power devices. It redefines how we design them. And your design, your system, is the future." Tiana didn't respond right away. She was watching the readout, eyes locked, heart steady. "I know," she said. "It's not just efficient. It's alive. It adapts." He smiled. "So do you." With the engine's final test logged and replicated, Victor called a private board meeting. It was the first time Tiana had to enter a room full of people who, months ago, wouldn't have glanced twice at her. This time, she was invited. She didn't wear a suit. She wore a tailored white blouse and a pair of trousers she had bought with the first check Victor insisted she accept. Not charity. Compensation. When the board members asked who she was, Victor let her speak. She stood at the front of the room, hands steady, eyes calm. "My name is Tiana Moore. I'm the co-developer of the new Zentek microinverter system. Some of you may recognize me. Some of you won't. I was once one of the top emerging engineers in this country. Then I fell. Hard. But I didn't forget how to build. No one said a word. And I didn't forget how to get back up." By the end of the week, her name was entered into the company's system again. Not as a cleaner, but as a lead project innovator. She had her own keycard, her own office, a team. The garage was no longer her home. The shadows no longer held her. Tiana had risen, not through handouts, not through luck, but by holding on to the part of herself that had never stopped burning. She was not just back. She was brilliant again. It began with a message. Tiana was at her desk, her own desk, in a minimalist office just down the hall from Victor's. The microinverter design was complete. The team she led had begun running durability tests. and the buzz in the company had reached a quiet hum of inevitability. Everyone knew something big was coming, though few outside the boardroom knew what it was, or who had built it. The message came from a law firm. She stared at the subject line, blinking once. Update, Damien Okoye, preliminary discovery results. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. Then slowly she clicked. Her eyes swept over the first lines, each word like a breath pulled from deep water. Damien had been found. Not dead. Not in hiding. Not some ghost lost in international paperwork. Living in Marbella, Spain, under a false identity, operating a luxury consultancy for fashion tech startups. Her original concept, twisted into a facade for new scams. He had used her work, her stolen files, even her abandoned designs, tweaked, watered down, and resold as pioneering to foreign investors who had no idea they were buying recycled theft. He had hidden under fake passports, rerouted transactions through digital banks in Dubai and Singapore, and lived in a penthouse suite with floor-to-ceiling views of the sea. Tiana didn't cry. She didn't rage. She sat perfectly still as a slow fire bloomed behind her sternum. Not revenge. Not even justice. Restoration. Victor was the first person she told. She found him in his office, sleeves rolled up, pacing in front of his transparent wall, reviewing analytics on Zenteca's stock projections. He turned when she entered. She didn't say much, just handed him the printed summary. He read it in silence. Then he asked just one question. Do you want to press charges? Tiana nodded once. Good, he said. Because I already had my legal team on standby. I hoped this day would come. He didn't ask for details. He didn't offer platitudes. He gave her power. Over the next 6 weeks, a coordinated legal offensive swept across 3 countries. Victor's legal team, discreet, ruthless, and precise, filed for fraud, embezzlement, theft of intellectual property, identity falsification, and international financial misconduct. Interpol got involved. An arrest warrant was issued quietly, and just like that, Damien Okoye, the man who had once stood beside Tiana on magazine covers, who had whispered promises of forever while stealing everything, was dragged from a yacht party in handcuffs. Tiana didn't attend the trial in person. She followed it online, through secure updates from her lawyers, watching from a distance as his empire crumbled. The most surreal part wasn't the arrest. It wasn't even seeing photos of him in a courtroom, eyes hollow, lips tight. It was the moment a judge ruled in her favor. That her company had, by every legal and creative measure, been hers. The IP was returned. The frozen assets recovered. Her name was cleared, formally, publicly, and finally. Her inbox filled with apologies from people who had once ghosted her. Designers who had once called her unreliable. Investors who once backed away. Now they called her a visionary. Funny, she thought. Where were they when she was sleeping in the garage? The first thing she did with her recovered funds was repay every debt she owed. Quietly, without fanfare. At Victor's suggestion, she agreed to a controlled press release. Nothing flashy, just a detailed feature in a well-respected business journal titled, The Engineer Who Was Sweeping Floors, How Tiana Moore Rewired Her Fate. It went viral within 48 hours. But not because of the sensationalism. Because of the truth. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't write a revenge saga. She told the story of a woman who fell, who broke, who nearly forgot who she was, but didn't. She told the truth about brilliance and betrayal. About systems that forget the fallen. About a CEO who looked past a uniform and listened. And about the woman who saw a broken equation and couldn't help but say, I can correct it. After the article dropped, speaking offers poured in. Panels. TEDx. Engineering conferences. Even fashion tech expos. She declined most of them. Instead, she visited her old university. Quietly. She met with students, held a workshop, and brought donuts. She wore jeans and a hoodie. No designer heels. No entourage. No press. She just sat with them and said, failure doesn't erase talent. Don't ever let it. She said it the way someone says something they've had to believe just to survive. One night, back at Zentec, She stood in the infinity room again, staring at the same board where her story had restarted. It was empty now, the screen dark, but the memory of that night still lingered, when she stepped out of the shadows and said 5 words that changed everything. She didn't hear Victor walk in. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You know," he said, "I don't believe in fate." Tiana turned toward him, arching a brow. "I believe in alignment," he continued. "Sometimes 2 broken paths meet, and the cracks fit." She smiled at him. "I don't know if I was broken," she said. "I think I was paused." He walked toward her. "Well, you're not paused anymore." She nodded. "No, I'm building again." And this time, no one would take it from her. Not a man. Not a scandal. Not silence. No one. It began again, not with applause or fanfare, but with a blank page. Tiana sat at her new desk in her own office, the sun pouring in through the full-length window behind her. She wasn't part of Zentech anymore. She had outgrown it. Not because she resented it. No. Zentech had been the chrysalis, the sanctuary, the bridge. But now that her wings had healed and spread, Tiana knew it was time to fly into something that was hers again. Truly hers, built from the ground up by her hands, her name, her legacy. She called it Emmer, a hybrid of her surname and the Akan word for rebirth. Not just a company, a statement, an intersection of science and soul. It would be the world's first engineering-driven fashion tech house, where design didn't follow trend but intelligence. Garments with temperature modulation, biometric response, built-in memory, adaptive fits. Designs that anticipated you. Clothing that wasn't just worn, but experienced. And Tiana Moore wasn't just its founder. She was its inventor. She started in a modest industrial space downtown. Exposed pipes. High ceilings. The walls were unfinished, and the scent of fresh plaster still hung in the air. But there was a spark in the place. She walked the floor barefoot one night thinking, this was where it would all begin. She didn't hire investors right away. She didn't want to sell a piece of her soul this time. She used her own reclaimed funds to set up the lab. Recruited talent from overlooked spaces, girls from community colleges, dropouts with brilliance in their eyes, displaced engineers, queer creatives, neurodivergent coders, immigrants whose credentials had been tossed aside. She built an army from the unseen. And together, they started designing a new world. One of her first products was the Luma jacket, a sleek, minimal coat embedded with a kinetic mesh that stored energy from movement and released warmth in colder temperatures. It could be powered by motion, programmed by phone, and had a self-healing outer layer for minor tears. It sold out in 12 minutes. Then came Trace, a modular backpack system with biometric locks and adjustable posture support. Then Sona, a line of noise-canceling scarves with directional microphones and voice assistant capability. Each piece was stamped with the Emmer logo, a small phoenix in a circle of light. Discreet. Elegant. A symbol that whispered, you can begin again. Tiana was no longer just an engineer. She was a symbol, invited onto global panels about innovation and resilience. Interviewed by major networks, not because of the fall she endured, but because of the world she built after it. They asked about Damien. She never spoke his name. They asked about the garage. She never denied it. They asked about Victor. Her face would soften. He didn't save me, she would say plainly. He saw me. That's more powerful. Victor and Tiana stayed close, though never romantic. Their bond was deeper than that, a shared respect between two people who had lost and built, failed and fixed, seen and been seen. He became one of Emmer's first clients. Not as a CEO, but as a man who now wore smartwear designed by the woman who once mopped his floors. Irony, Tiana thought, was the universe's favorite tool of symmetry. Eventually, the world had no choice but to rewrite her story. Where once the headlines had read the girl who lost it all, now they called her the woman who engineered her return. But Tiana didn't care for headlines. She cared about the girl who used to sketch designs under a flickering light in a freezing parking garage. The woman who had to walk past her own name on a company she no longer owned. The hands that used to tremble while holding a mop, but now built wearable miracles. She cared about the next brilliant mind in hiding, the next woman who had been written off, the next genius who was one open door away from everything. One day, she stood on the roof of her new headquarters, a sustainable glass tower in the city center, fitted with solar panels she helped design. Below her, the world buzzed. A skyline she once had to watch from the outside now pulsed beneath her feet. She took a breath and whispered to no one in particular. I didn't need luck. I needed a moment. She'd taken that moment and built a new world with it. A world where women rise from concrete. Where failure is not a tomb, but a tunnel. Where genius sleeps in shadows, waiting to be seen. And when it speaks, it says, I can correct it. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.